2011 was a huge year in pop culture. In television, Game of Thrones would first hit our screens. In the world of music, Adele was topping the charts with her hit song Rolling in the Deep, and in wrestling, it would be a banner year for other reasons, mostly on account of the rise of one superstar in particular. But how did it all happen? Well, join us today as we take a deep dive into the entire story from start to finish in the WWE in 2011, a year in review. When we last left off, Edge was the World Heavyweight Champion over on Smackdown, The Miz had recently won the WWE title on Raw, and the Nexus experiment had crashed and burned. So, hoping to move on from the whole debacle then, the company put their best foot forward for the first big pay-per-view of the year on January 30th, the Royal Rumble. But what separated this Rumble from past events was that, for the first time ever, rather than the titular match being made up of 30 men, it would now host 40 superstars, each battling for a main event spot at WrestleMania. And if you were wondering whether this was too much of a good thing, you'd be right, because in the end, the whole thing turned into a bit of a mess, albeit one which wasn't without a few highlights, such as an early period of domination from both CM Punk and Daniel Bryan. Once it was all over though, it would be neither of these men who were standing tall as the winner. No, that honor was saved for relative newcomer Alberto Del Rio after he last eliminated Santino Marella. Of course, this wasn't the only big moment on the show, however, because elsewhere, Eve Torres was overcoming Lay Cool and Natalya to become the new Divas champion, The Miz was successfully defending his WWE title against Randy Orton, and Edge managed to get the better of Dolph Ziggler so as to retain the World Heavyweight title. That said, in order to do so, he had to use his spear finisher, something which had been banned by SmackDown general manager Vicky Guerrero prior to the bout. So this would lead to Vicky stripping the Rated R superstar of the belt on the February 18th episode of the Blue Brand, and from there, awarding it to the Show-Off instead. Luckily though, this would also be the same night where Teddy Long returned to take back his job from the usurper, and from there, give Edge a one-on-one rematch for the title, playa. And after that was done, it would be the Canadian who once again stood tall as the champ, with him continuing to carry this belt with pride as WWE moved in Elimination Chamber just 2 days later. However, he'd have a tough challenge to contend with because inside of the titular chamber, he'd be forced to defend against Rey Mysterio, Kane, Drew McIntyre, The Big Show, and Wade Barrett. But despite this, in the end the champ was able to retain, with him using all of his guile and wits to do so. And the same could be said for The Miz too, because while he didn't have to face off against 5 challengers that night, he did have to go one-on-one with Jerry the King Lawler. Of course, Lawler may have been a bit longer in the tooth at this point, but that didn't stop him from coming close to winning the belt at a couple of points, only for the heel champ to eventually outsmart him and walk away still on top of the mountain. But by the end of the night, his main concern would be staying on top at WrestleMania because, following his successful defense here, another Elimination Chamber match took place featuring John Cena, CM Punk, Randy Orton, Sheamus, John Morrison, and R-Truth, with the winner of this getting a shot at the WWE title at the biggest show of the year. So, who would win? Who else but Big Match John himself, as with Alberto Del Rio staking his claim at Edge over on SmackDown, the 2 big title bouts were now set in stone. Before we'd get to them though, a major shockwave was sent through the industry when, after The Rock returned to WWE for the first time in almost a decade to announce he was going to be the guest host of WrestleMania 27, he'd continue to appear on Raw week in and week out in order to get in the face of John Cena. Yes, it appeared the 2 megastars had taken a legitimate disliking to one another after some comments John made about Rocky's dedication to the industry upset the People's Champion. So during this, they built up their beef over the weeks which followed, teasing an eventual showdown between them. Unfortunately though, that left the actual champion, The Miz, feeling like so much of an afterthought, you'd have been forgiven for forgetting he was Cena's actual upcoming opponent. Still, it was what it was, and, with Mania drawing ever nearer, the company felt like using The Rock as much as possible would guarantee them the biggest buy rate. Would this work though? Well, we'd find out on April 3rd, but before that, the newest Hall of Fame class was inducted on April 2nd, when big names such as the Road Warriors, Hacksaw Jim Duggan, and headliner Shawn Michaels all got their rings. Then once that was done, it was time for the showcase of the Immortals to begin with a bang when Edge successfully defended the World Heavyweight title against Royal Rumble winner Alberto Del Rio. That said, this wasn't originally supposed to be the opener. No, that was supposed to be Daniel Bryan versus Sheamus, but due to time constraints, the United States title ended up getting bumped to the pre-show, a decision which started off a major chain of events we'll return to in a few years' time. Moving back to the main show for now though, undashing Cody Rhodes was up next as he got his first big WrestleMania singles moment by picking up a win over Rey Mysterio. And after that was over, CM Punk, someone who had by then dropped the Straight Edge Society in favor of leading the new Nexus instead, challenged Randy Orton in a losing effort. Sadly, however, from this point on it would be mostly downhill, as in a match which took up almost 24 minutes on a WrestleMania card, Michael Cole defeated Jerry the King Lawler with Stone Cold Steve Austin acting as the special guest referee. Then, in an arguably even worse moment, reality TV star Snooki got a prominent spot on the show when she teamed with John Morrison and Trish Stratus to defeat Dolph Ziggler and LayCool. Yes, there's a reason this one is considered one of the weakest Manias ever by many people, and it's because of moments like those. That said, it wasn't as if everything was bad, because up after that would be the next in a line of Undertaker classics when he put his streak on the line against Triple H. Why Triple H? Well, following the dead man's retirement of Shawn Michaels the prior year, the Game wanted revenge for his fallen friend. And in this match, he'd take The Undertaker to places he'd never been before. So much so that despite coming out the winner and raising his streak to 19-0 after grabbing a lucky submission hold at the end, the Phenom would have to be helped out of the arena while Triple H walked out on his own 2 feet. That's right, by now the story was starting to shift to the idea that Mark Calloway was beginning to wear down after each successive year. But while this would be picked up again the next year, for the time being, it was all about the main event where John Cena challenged The Miz for the WWE title. And while everyone expected Cena to win this one, in the end things would conclude in a double countout. That was until The Rock got involved, of course, and used his powers as guest host to restart the match. Before he did though, he delivered a rock bottom to Big Match John, allowing the champ to retain immediately thereafter. And so, the following night on Raw then, Rock and Cena met in the ring once more, with them here making the decision to settle things once and for all at WrestleMania 28 in April of 2012. But while many fans thought it was a curious choice to book the WrestleMania main event 1 year out, it wasn't the big story come the end of this month, because on the April 11th episode of Raw, following his title defense against Alberto Del Rio a week prior, Edge came out to the ring to announce that, due to a spinal stenosis diagnosis, he'd be forced to retire with immediate effect. And while this shocked and devastated fans everywhere, it also left the status of the World Heavyweight title in the air, because with the champ now being unable to defend it, a new one would have to be crowned. Of course, this happened at the next pay-per-view of the year, May 1st's Extreme Rules, as there, Christian defeated Alberto Del Rio in a ladder match to finally realize a lifelong dream of reaching the top. And that wasn't the only big title change here either, because in the WWE title match, John Cena finally got the better of The Miz to start his 10th reign as world champion. But Cena's troubles weren't over yet, because later that month at May 22nd's Over the Limit, The Miz got his rematch, with this one being held under I Quit rules. Meanwhile, over on the Smackdown side of things, the World Heavyweight title scene was far more convoluted, as after Christian won the belt, Vince McMahon apparently soured on him and had Randy Orton dethrone him on the May 6th episode of Smackdown less than a week later. And at this point, rather than portray Captain Charisma as an underdog babyface looking to get his title back, WWE decided to turn him heel and have him continually beg the Viper for one more match. Then, to make matters worse, when he finally got this rematch at Over the Limit, he'd be unable to get the job done, as Orton hit him with an RKO to score the pinfall after just under 17 minutes. Yes, we weren't quite out of the dark days yet, as evidenced by the fact that, aside from Cena ultimately retaining his WWE title here, the rest of the card saw the likes of Tag Team Champions The Big Show and Kane defend against the new Nexus' CM Punk and Mason Ryan, Ezekiel Jackson win the Intercontinental strap from Wade Barrett, and Michael Cole and Jerry Lawler fight it out again in a Kiss My Foot match. Maybe then fans hoped June 19th's Capital Punishment would be better. Unfortunately though, this event also wasn't up to much, as with the most notable moments on the card being The Miz and his former protege Alex Riley coming to blows, Christian losing to Randy Orton again, and R-Truth's brief main event singles run ending with him losing to John Cena, there just wasn't that much to talk about. No, what WWE needed was something big to snap it out of its lengthy period of creative stagnation, and luckily this very thing was just around the corner. It started on the June 20th episode of Raw. That was when CM Punk, who was by now the new #1 contender to John Cena's WWE title, ran out during the champ's match against R-Truth to cost him the victory, all before then sitting down cross-legged at the top of the aisle and delivering a blistering promo which shattered the fourth wall and aired every grievance he had with the company. And during the course of this promo, he'd also let it be known that his contract was legitimately running out on July 17th, the very night of Money in the Bank, and that on this night, he'd be beating John for the title, then leaving WWE with it in tow. Of course, immediately following Punk's now famous pipe bomb, the internet was ablaze as to whether or not what they'd seen was real. But while it later did come to light it had been planned, it was also true he was intending to leave when his contract ran out, and that every negative thing he'd said about the company during that promo represented his reasons behind this. So, heading into Money in the Bank, lapsed fans all over the world suddenly found themselves being drawn back in as, in front of his home city of Chicago, the voice of the voiceless was expected to be treated like the second coming of Stone Cold Steve Austin. Yes, even if Vince McMahon still saw him as the heel in this situation, it was clear the fans disagreed and that, because of Punk, for the first time in almost a decade, wrestling felt truly exciting again. And it was made even more exciting by the fact that as the show went on the air on July 17th, it remained unclear as to whether or not the challenger had signed a new contract in reality. So the question became, was he leaving, or was this just an elaborate angle where he'd win the belt then appear to flee with it, just as he had done in Ring of Honor years prior? Before we'd find out the answer to this, though, arguably the best pay-per-view WWE had put on since SummerSlam 2002 kicked off with the Smackdown Money in the Bank ladder match, which saw Daniel Bryan score the victory over Cody Rhodes, Heath Slater, Justin Gabriel, Kane, Sin Cara, Sheamus, and Wade Barrett to earn a shot at the World Heavyweight title at a time of his choosing. Then after all that, on the Raw side of things, Alberto Del Rio did the same for the WWE title when he defeated The Miz, Alex Riley, Evan Bourne, Kofi Kingston, Jack Swagger, R-Truth, and Rey Mysterio. And as if this wasn't a big enough deal for the fans in attendance, prior to the main event, Christian would regain the World Heavyweight title when, in truly heelish fashion, he got Randy Orton to disqualify himself and subsequently drop the belt to him as per the terms of a pre-match stipulation. But really, this was all table setting for the big moment of the night, because once that was over, CM Punk came out to the ring to a messianic response. After that, a battle for the very fate of the company took place over the next 33 minutes, during which time even Vince McMahon and John Laurinaitis appeared at ringside so as to try and ensure Cena came out the winner. In the end, though, it was Punk who got the win to a massive ovation. And when the boss got on a headset and demanded Alberto Del Rio come out to cash in his Money in the Bank contract immediately thereafter, he'd eat a quick kick to the head from the new champion before Punk then blew a kiss to Vince and left through the crowd. Truly, it was perfect. Had it carried on in the same manner then, it very well could have been the start of a third boom period for the industry, one which would have seen a new anti-hero stand at the forefront. Ultimately, though, it all began to fall apart soon thereafter, as once a new WWE champion was crowned in the form of Rey Mysterio on the July 25th episode of Raw, he'd immediately put his belt on the line against John Cena, only for Cena to subsequently defeat him and start his 11th reign on top. Then following that, just 3 weeks after he'd left forever, CM Punk returned to the sounds of Cult of Personality to announce he'd now signed a new contract and would be challenging Big Match John to see who the real top guy was going forward. Yes, rather than let Punk run around the indies for months claiming to be the real champion and selling the whole angle as being legitimate, WWE pushed through things quickly in order to get a big pay-per-view match at SummerSlam. And sure, while in hindsight you could argue Cena versus Mysterio for the title would have been big enough, Vince McMahon evidently saw things differently at the time. So it was then that on August 14th, at the biggest show of the summer, Punk got the win over Cena, only to then be immediately attacked by Kevin Nash and lose the WWE title to a Money in the Bank cash-in from Alberto Del Rio. And that wasn't the only disappointing thing about this show either, because prior to the main event, in an otherwise pretty forgettable show and a huge come-down from the month before, the only really other notable moment was Christian once again losing the World Heavyweight title to Randy Orton. Still, at least it wasn't all bad, because on the August 29th episode of Raw, WWE mercifully ended the brand split when they announced that, from there on in, Raw and SmackDown rosters would be blended permanently. But that did little to keep the lapsed fans from continuing to tune in, though, because with it now becoming apparent that the summer of Punk was quickly devolving into a feud between Punk, Kevin Nash, and new on-screen COO Triple H, it all started to feel a little less Steve Austin in 1998 and a little more Diesel in 1995. Yes, at September 18th's Night of Champions, rather than being in the WWE title scene, the voice of the voiceless was losing clean to Triple H. And meanwhile, as this was happening, it would be John Cena who ultimately defeated Del Rio to start his 12th reign as champion. But that wasn't the only big title change at this show, because despite the World Heavyweight title now effectively being relegated to mid-card status following the end of the brand split, Mark Henry's House of Pain gimmick got him over enough to the point where he would dethrone Randy Orton for this belt here. And proving he deserved the spot, he'd successfully defend it during the rematch against the Viper at October 2nd's Hell in a Cell, in a bout which took place inside of the titular cage. Of course, that wasn't the only Cell match of the night though, because after Cody Rhodes defended his recently won Intercontinental title against John Morrison in a winning effort, a triple threat bout took place which saw John Cena, Alberto Del Rio, and CM Punk battle it out inside the cage over the WWE title. Even on this night though, Punk still wouldn't get his win back. No, by the end of the show, the focus would be on R-Truth and The Miz instead. Two people who, angry at their lack of time and attention on TV, invaded the Cell after Del Rio scored the victory and brought the show to a standstill. And following this, the Awesome Truth became arguably a bigger deal than Punk for a while, as over the next few weeks, they continued to make life a living hell for Triple H and everyone else in management. So, leading into October 23rd's Vengeance then, the Game booked himself in a tag team bout against the heel duo. And in a moment which only further neutered CM Punk, the once rebellious anti-hero would be reduced to partnering up with the Boss here. That's right, it was a far cry from where he should have been, and one which was made all the worse by the fact the Second City Saint ate the losing pinfall too. Thank God Survivor Series would see the company showing signs of improvement once more when that came around on November 20th then, as there, in a moment which should have happened months prior, Punk finally got to go one-on-one with Alberto Del Rio and defeat him to start what ended up being a 434-day run with the WWE title. That said, by now, much of the magic from the summer of Punk had dissipated, and so the moment didn't feel as big as it should have, but at least what came after it felt like a big deal, because in a tune-up bout heading into his WrestleMania 28 encounter with John Cena, The Rock wrestled his first match since 2004 when he teamed up with Big Match John to finally put an end to the Awesome Truth once and for all. And this turned out to be a major success for WWE financially, as there was still enough interest in seeing the Great One return to action so as to keep a healthy fan base watching. It's just a shame Vince McMahon couldn't capitalize on this with the last pay-per-view of the year then, because following another Tribute to the Troops show on December 11th, WWE headed over to Baltimore for December 18th's TLC, Tables, Ladders, and Chairs. And well, at least one notable moment happened here when Daniel Bryan successfully cashed in his Money in the Bank contract on a prone Big Show to win the World Heavyweight title. The rest of the card was pretty lackluster. So lackluster was it, in fact, aside from CM Punk retaining the WWE title against both Alberto Del Rio and The Miz in a triple threat TLC match, the only other real points worthy of mention were Cody Rhodes beating Booker T to keep the Intercontinental title around his waist, and Triple H and Kevin Nash stinking out the joint in a sledgehammer ladder match. Still, there were positives heading into the new year anyway, as with CM Punk now finally the established champion, and The Rock preparing himself for a WrestleMania showdown with John Cena, big things were on the horizon. Of course, even the most optimistic of fans could never have guessed at that time that one of those big things would be the return of a former WWE Undisputed Champion and UFC Heavyweight Champion who was bringing the pain along with him all over again.